All right, here we go. We're talking about why are so many children having trouble focusing? Why are so many being diagnosed with ADHD? Why is there so much anxiety right now in the world? I mean, I guess that goes without saying. It's pretty stressful right now. But we have Dr. Shawn Talbott. He is a nutritional biochemist, a psychonutritionist, and a formulator of the gut-brain axis nutrition system with the Mental Wellness Company. So, Dr. Shawn, thank you so much for being with me. I know your time is limited, so we're going to cut right to the chase. So, what is going on with our children today? You know, what's happening? Where's the root of all of it?
Yeah, well, I think you made the understatement of the year right there, Dale, when you said there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on. You know, it's not just kids, right? I know we're going to focus on kids, right? But it's parents, it's teenagers, it's college students, it's everybody across the board is just overwhelmed with all the input. And one of the things that is, so, you know, we can think of it from sort of, you know, the biological evolutionary sort of terms. Humans are not meant to be multitaskers, right? There is a whole huge body of scientific literature that shows this, that we're bad multitaskers. And even if somebody thinks they're a good multitasker, they're not. You know, all they're good at is quickly shifting from one focus to one focus to one focus to one focus. Like that shifting is not very productive in terms of your overall ability to get things done and do good work and be creative and all that kind of stuff. So that's the first problem. But let's just put that aside for a second, because it's one thing to say, oh, well, humans aren't good multitaskers, so therefore you shouldn't multitask, right? In a perfect world, we would all just focus on one thing at a time, but we can't. And so what we really need to do is say, what can we do in the modern world to help with that problem of all these multiple inputs coming in and our brains not being designed for that, right? So, you know, there's one part of stress resilience that we can improve. There's one part of directly lowering the stress response. There's one part of improving the brain circuits and how they fire so that your memory is better and your focus is better, and, you know, the blood flow to the brain is better, so you're getting good nutrient delivery. And there's a lot of things that we can do to make the brain work better within the system that we've put ourselves in, which is this modern world.
Right. So what's a good place for people to start, you know, for moms that are like searching for something for their kids? They maybe not feeling comfortable with the medication that's being, you know, advised, or where would you start them?
Yeah, well, you know, my kids now are in college, but, you know, I feel for parents who have, you know, elementary age kids or middle schoolers or high schoolers, because when our kids were that age, we actually at one point had for my son, his fifth grade, when he was in, I think it was when he was in fourth grade or fifth grade, his teacher came to my wife and said, you guys need to consider medicating this kid, right? Because he can't focus. He's not staying still. He's got ants in his pants. And, you know, my wife, to her credit, kind of said, you know, well, I think my husband might have something to say about that, right? Because of the kind of work that I do. And so, you know, we used a combination of natural ingredients. We used an amino acid called theanine. We used a flavonoid that comes from a pine bark extract. You know, nowadays, you know, this was years and years ago, but nowadays there are really good pomegranate extracts. There are really good saffron extracts. In fact, some of these things that I'm listing are used in other countries as first-line natural therapy for ADHD. So in Japan, you would use theanine. In New Zealand, you would use pine bark. In Spain, you would use saffron, right? So these are cultures that have said, hey, we know that those pharmaceutical options are there. We know that they have, you know, certain effects and also certain side effects. But why wouldn't you, if you had access to something like that as a parent, why wouldn't you try that natural product first to see if you can get the kinds of benefits that you're looking for in your children? And then if you don't, you know, then you have the sledgehammer of the pharmaceutical to go to as a plan B. And so for our kids, you know, they took theanine, they took pine bark, they took saffron, they took pomegranate, they took all these kinds of things. And in a very short time, the teachers literally came back to us and said, oh, thanks for taking our advice, because the kids were so much better. It appeared as if we had medicated them, but we didn't. You know, in fact, some of these things, you know, being used in other countries, there are clinical trials out there that show that they are equivalent to things like Ritalin for ADHD, that they're equivalent to things like Prozac for depression, And so a lot of times, the kids that have trouble focusing are also the kids that later on have issues with anxiety and depression and things like that. So if you can kind of nip it in the bud and really help them to not just focus, right? That's only one piece of it. You want them to focus, but you want them to do it in a way that's engaged and connected and creative. A lot of times those pharmaceutical solutions will really focus them, but it's sort of pushing out their ability to be creative and to think out of the box and things like that. So these natural options sometimes are a much better approach for a lot of kids.
Awesome. So you brought your knowledge of herbs and what you used a long time ago into the formulation of this gut-brain axis nutrition system that you are representing now, and myself as well. Can you talk about that, ingredients of it, and just how it works?
Yeah, so I'm the kind of scientist who loves the science, right? To be able to say to people, there's these natural options out there. Go look for saffron. Go look for pine bark. But it's even better if you can actually get those, get the actual one that was used in the clinical trial and put it into a product. And then you can say to somebody, here's the actual product. And this is the one that uses the same level that was used in the trials, the same extract strength, the same purity, the same potency, all that kind of stuff. Because it's, parents are busy, right? And, especially these days with, kids doing online school and things like that, you want something that you can just grab and plug into the situation and see if you get the benefit. So, it's the idea of taking the science, but then applying it so you can actually use it in your actual life. So what we did was we said, okay, there's things we can do directly in the brain. Things like some of the things that I mentioned before. The theanine can work in about 30 minutes. The saffron can work in about 30 minutes. So you can get that effect very, very quickly. But then going forward, how can we help with some of the things that can interfere with that child's ability to focus? Things like stress, things like irritability, things like tension, which are related to, but are separate from the outcome that you're trying to get. So then we have to look at the gut and we have to say, all right, where are these neurotransmitters being produced in the first place? The serotonin that helps keep you in a good mood, the dopamine that helps with motivation, the GABA that helps you relax when you're stressed out. And so then we can focus on the gut. So what we decided to do is put together a whole kit that really gives kids, first of all, the baseline nutrition that they need, the vitamins and the minerals and the phytonutrients that they're probably not getting in their diet. So we have a multivitamin called VitaGBX that does that. Then we look at gut integrity. And there are actually specific strains of bacteria that we can give and specific fibers that we can give that help with mood and tension and resilience. And then there are the other performance herbs that we can give, the things like saffron and pine bark and pomegranate and things like that can really take the kids to that new level of mental performance, So then parents can sit back and say, well, what level do I think my kids need? Do they just need better nutrition? Do they need, help with their gut-brain axis? Or do they need these targeted, focused mood performance herbs? Maybe they need all of those, but we create 3 separate products so parents can choose what level of intervention is best for them.
So do you typically see, with children with like focus issues or behavioral, meltdowns and all that kind of thing, do you typically see other things going on in the gut that connect with that, that type of behavior? What other symptoms could parents recognize and say, oh yeah, my kid's, gut is out of balance and this is why he's acting this way? Can you kind of connect?
Absolutely. Yeah, so if they're gut issues, a lot of times those kids will have trouble focusing, but they'll be a little more, I don't want to say anxious in the sense of like they're having panic attacks or something like that, but they might be a little more irritable. They might be a little bit easier to set off, to either have a meltdown or a blow up or some sort of a behavioral issue in a situation where where they're nervous and anxious. And so we actually did a trial and published the data earlier this year, where we're able to show that if you can control some of those things, if you can restore balance in the gut, and even more importantly, balance across the whole gut-brain axis in these kids, not only do they focus better and have better mood and, those sorts of things, but when they're in stressful situations, when they're in situations where you might expect the wheels to come off, they're in, schoolwork, or they're in a social situation, or they're with their sports team or something like that. Those are situations where a lot of kids sometimes can, stressful. And so it puts pressure against the system, so to speak. So they might be good to begin with, but then you put them in a stressful situation and something bad happens. Even in those stressful situations, these kids were still performing at a much higher level than they were pre-supplementation, so that's important, because a lot of times, kids can look perfectly fine when everything is controlled around them, and it's a nice calm setting. But then you put them in those stressful situations, and things go awry. And we're able to show that that's demonstrating that not only are they focused, but they're able to focus under pressure, and that's really where it matters.
Yeah, that stress resilience piece, right? That's like
resilience, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, resilience. So would you say that if a child is having like constipation, would that be like a clear sign that there is dysbiosis in the gut? And would that be at all connected with the way their brain is operating like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in some kids, it could be constipation. In some kids, it could be, common. It's very common for kids when they're stressed out to say that they have a stomach ache, right? Or that they're not hungry, or this, and that's a clear sign that the stress from this brain, what we call your first brain in your head, is sending those stress signals down to your second brain, which is your gut. And that can be, manifested as these, stomach aches or indigestion or nausea, or, feeling sick to your stomach, or constipation or diarrhea, right? There's all sort of ways that can sort of be transferred there. But that's also a signal that those signals are now going to come from the second brain up to the first brain. And there, instead of being a stomach ache in your head, it's going to be an inability to focus, or irritability, or anger, or dissociation. Sometimes we see, especially in teenagers, instead, like in littler kids, they won't be able to focus. In older kids, they'll more likely be, irritable or angry. And then sometimes they'll even move towards what's the word that I'm looking for? They stop being interested in things that they were interested in before. They start to kind of separate themselves and, lock themselves in their room and not want to talk to anybody and things like that. So there's sort of different manifestations of that depending on the age and the maturity of the child.
That's really interesting, because so if we can get it for our younger kids, get them in balance, then hopefully it won't progress to that teenager who's blowing up and full of anger and all that. What we see a lot, right?
Yeah,
see that.
Yeah, exactly. Because they, it's the same thing that happens with adults. If you can show up into a stressful situation, and it's not to say that we don't want to lower our stress, but if you can show up to that situation and have a good stress resilience, we're able to measure something called cognitive flexibility. It's your ability to kind of navigate your way strategically through whatever that stressful situation is. And there's all kinds of ways that we can measure this. We can measure strategy formation. We can measure, your ability to solve problems, all that kind of stuff. And so if we can teach our kids that when they're younger and get them in the habit of showing up and going, wow, this isn't a great situation, instead of throwing a fit, I'm going to figure out how to deal with all of this, right? That's a good set of skills that we can just help that process through with the right sorts of natural ingredients.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, explain one more time again about how the gut really dictates what our brain hears, or what is communicated to the brain.
Yeah. So the easiest way for me to explain that to people is to tell them that the majority of our neurotransmitters are made in our gut, right? Why do you care about that? Because a neurotransmitter like serotonin that helps with happiness, and if we don't have enough of it, sadness, 90% of that is made in the gut. About 70% of our dopamine that helps with motivation is made in the gut. Most of our GABA that helps with relaxation is made in the gut. Most of our norepinephrine that clearly helps us focus is made in the gut. And so it's not like, when I explain that, I think people sometimes think, oh, great, if I make more of these neurotransmitters, they'll just somehow flow up to my brain and I'll get these mental benefits. It doesn't exactly work that way. But having more of them in the gut, we know, is associated in our psychology studies with better mental performance, better focus, better memory, better mood, et cetera, et cetera. So we're able to show that. The mechanism of what's going on probably involves your level of inflammation. It probably involves your immune system. It probably involves your endocannabinoid system. So there's a lot of signaling that happens between the first brain and the second brain. And it's sometimes hard to tease out. We can measure each of these individually, but there's a lot of crosstalk and overlapping and redundancy in these signals. But we know quite clearly, if your gut health is better, your mental performance is going to be better.
Wow. So now people know about probiotics. Like, they know they should be taking probiotics for their gut, and they will just go to a store and pick a probiotic off the shelf. I know you love this topic because we did a whole video on this topic.
Right.
So tell our viewers what is different about the probiotics in this gut-brain axis system.
Yeah, well, they're very targeted for mental wellness. So one of the things that we didn't really know as early as sort of 5 years ago, we used to just say to people, you know what? Probiotics are important. Drink your kombucha, eat your yogurt, eat your fermented foods, and get a lot of fiber, and that'll be about as good as we can do. But in the last few years, we've really gotten some good science to show that these probiotics are very targeted at a strain level. So what that means is you could have one strain of probiotic bacteria that helps with constipation and another strain that helps with diarrhea, right? Completely opposite sorts of effects just based on the strain level. And so that tells us that we need to educate people about the strain determines the benefit that you're going to get. So when we talk about that in the context of mental wellness, we know now that there are strains that help with depression, strains that help with anxiety, strains that help with stress. There are fibers that can help with gut regularity, but there are fibers that can help with resilience. So if we can put together the right cocktail, the right recipe of this strain for this and this strain for that, we can actually deliver something that helps with the whole gamut of mental wellness benefits, right? And so then you take something that's helping your gut, but the benefit you notice in your everyday life is you're able to focus, you're able to be resilient, you're able to be calm, you're able to be energetic and engaged and connected. And, you say this to people and they go, well, that sounds too good to be true. How can you get that? And it really is, because if you can change that microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, now you have this internal natural pharmacy that's going to make all those neurotransmitters when you need them at the levels that you need them in the scenario that they benefit you the best. So it's a really, fundamentally different way of thinking about all these aspects of performance.
Yeah, amazing. And just a different way of thinking about not just taking any supplement, taking a supplement that is designed to do what you're looking for it to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I joke with people. I can see you're sort of grinning about, people just go to the grocery store and they buy whatever probiotic is on sale. That would be the same thing as going to the grocery store and just seeing a plain white bottle that says vitamins on it. Nobody would ever buy that without knowing, well, what vitamins and how much and what do they do? And it's the same thing with probiotics. And most of the probiotic products on the market don't even tell you what strain is in that bottle. And so if you don't know the strain, you have no idea what benefits that product is allegedly delivering to you. That's why we really focus people at the strain level as much as we can.
That's amazing. And I know you had said that to me, and I went and investigated and went to the store and looked at all the probiotics, and there was not one, like you said, not one that had the strain. So it was really interesting, because I've always taken probiotics, but I never really felt different. Like, I was like, yeah, I should take this because it's good for me. But now I realize, and that's why, we see such like life-changing results with these products, because people are getting the benefits And it's not something that you can like, oh yeah, I think I feel better. It's kind of like, yes,
Right.
I have better stress resilience. I'm not blowing up at my kids anymore.
Right,
You know,
exactly. And I'll say one thing about that. You know, the reports that I love to hear back are from the people who say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think I was a candidate for this kind of a product. You know, I didn't have a problem, so to speak, that I was trying to solve. You know, I thought I was doing pretty okay." And then they get the benefits when they see what this does for them once you get your microbiome in balance and you get the right signals coming across your gut-brain axis. And a lot of parents will see that benefit and they'll go, "Oh my gosh, my kids could benefit from this too." You know, so you don't have to have an issue necessarily to want to make sure that your gut is at its optimal performance.
yeah, I hear you. To me, it's like an insurance policy, because
Mm-hmm.
I know that if I can keep my gut in balance, I can keep my immune system too. We didn't even talk about that.
Right.
You want to talk about that a little bit, being that we're in this pandemic right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, so people are concerned about their immune system now, and they're thinking, well, you know, I need to take zinc and I need to take vitamin C and vitamin D and things, and those are fine things to do, but from the perspective of if we get our gut right, balanced, it can help our mental performance. One of the ways that it does that is signaling through the immune system. It's an effect that we refer to as immune system priming. And so we focus on that. About 70% of your immune system resides in the gut anyway. So if we're addressing gut health, we're making your immune system stronger, and we're not just making it a better shield against viruses and things like that. We're also making it a better communication organ between those two brains. And as a result of that, you feel better. And we've done clinical trials to show that people feel on average about 20% better on this parameter that we call psychological vigor. And that's sort of an overall well-being parameter. So, you know, you do something for your gut, your immune system gets stronger, you're more protected, you feel better, you're more resilient. Like I can't think of anybody, especially in 2020, with what 2020 has been, who wouldn't be interested in those sorts of benefits.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a family. It should be a family affair. Because our kids need it desperately, and our kids are sensing our stress too. You know what I mean? So if we can, and that's what I see happen. I see moms go in, they look at the stories, what's happening with people's kids, and they read the science, and then they're like, you know what? I wanted this for my kid, but I think I need some too.
Right.
So it's like, that's a beautiful thing, because your kids are feeding off. If you're stressed out, you're snapping at them. Like, you don't want to be doing that either.
Right. And I see so many stories right now of exactly what you just described, Dale. You know, it's everybody's home now, right? Your parents are working from home, kids are schooling from home, you're in tight quarters, everybody's stressed out, you know, and you know, you hear, you know, moms and dads talking about how guilty they feel because, you know, they're locked in on their Zoom calls or whatever they're doing, and they snap at their kids because their kids are trying to ask questions about their Zoom calls. And you know, this is the time where people need, you know, exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's amazing. So good. Well, thank you, Dr. Shawn. I don't want to keep you too long because I know we could literally talk for hours. I appreciate your time so much. Thanks again. I appreciate you.
My pleasure, Dale.
Have an amazing day, everyone. Let's help our kids out and ourselves, right? We need harmony in the home.